Good evening, and welcome to New York Buddha Dharma. Floating here in infinite space. Truly, the universe is infinite, right? Expanding in every direction at the speed of light. $12 million miles a minute. 186,000 miles per second. And we're worried about the bus route home. Oh boy. So, we were talking about some teachings that I was fortunate to receive in the last few weeks in California from a man named Khenpo Namdrol. Khenpo Namdrol is a wonderful teacher. Khenpo is a title that sort of means PhD, kind of. You get the title Khenpo after a lot of study, 12 or more years. And he actually ran the school that trained the Khenpos for a long time. Now he's semi-retired, but he travels the world teaching. And he puts very little of himself into these teachings. He always teaches the works of great teachers. And in fact, each year, well, not each year, but many of the years that he's taught, I've been studying with him since 2003. And he will start out by saying, I'm going to put nothing of myself into this. I only want to give you the words of, and almost always he's teaching Longchenpa. Longchen Ramjam, goes by many other names too, who lived in the 14th century and is regarded by many of the Tibetans as being the greatest of all the teachers. Certainly Trungpa Rinpoche felt that way. And Longchenpa taught everything, of course, but the main thing that he taught, and he's most revered for, was the teachings he gave on Chögyam. The Buddhist path is graded in 9 grades. And then there are subdivisions within each of these grades. And this is the Nyingma scheme. And those 9 grades are divided into 3. The first grade is the so-called lesser vehicle. Trungpa Rinpoche preferred to call it the foundational vehicle. It's kind of a slam to call it the lesser vehicle. It's what the schools that came after called it. And the second middle group, and that in itself is comprised of 2 sub-vehicles. Vehicle, see, the word is yana in Sanskrit, tekpa in Tibetan. And the Hinayana, meaning lesser vehicle, is divided into 2 sub-vehicles, the vehicle of the listeners and the vehicle of the Buddhas, or the individuals who achieve enlightenment by themselves and for themselves. So they achieve a lesser kind of enlightenment until they progress, if they do, into the second vehicle, which is called the greater vehicle, yana, Mahayana. Maha means great, yana is again vehicle, cart. And the Mahayana is divided into 10 stages called bhumis in Sanskrit, sa in Tibetan. And they culminate in enlightenment at the end of the Mahayana, which is sometimes called the 11th bhumi. And then that is the beginning or the entrance into the Vajrayana, the adamantine vehicle. Vajra means indestructible. Vajra is literally the thunderbolt that Indra threw. It was his weapon. And it would always return to his hand. And it would destroy whatever it came in contact with and then come back to him. And in itself, it was indestructible. And it became a symbol for the ultimate teachings, the Vajrayana. And the Vajrayana in the Nyingma scheme, Nyingma is one of the four main sects of Tibetan Buddhism, is divided into 6 subdivisions. And I'm not going to bother giving you all 6 of them. It doesn't matter at this point for tonight's talk. But they are divided into the outer 3 and the so-called inner 3. And the last of the inner 3, the sort of the ultimate vehicle, is called, in Sanskrit, Ati, or sometimes called Mahasandhi. And in Tibetan it's called Dzogchen, which means great perfection. And Dzogchen itself is divided into subsections. 3 main ones. First one is called the division having to do with mind. The second one is called the division having to do with space. And the third one is called the division having to do with oral instruction, which is the highest of those 3, the Upadesha class. And then the Upadesha class is itself divided into 4. The outer, the inner, the secret, and finally the secret heart essence. And most of what Longchenpa taught was having to do with that 4th division, the most sublime of all of these teachings. And one of the things that characterizes this, and I'll just tell you this because it illustrates what we're all involved in from the very beginning. The main difference between the ultimate teachings of the Upadesha class, and especially of the 4th division of the Upadesha class, and everything that falls beneath, is what is called the difference between taking mind as the path and taking wisdom as the path. Only the very highest teachings take wisdom as the path. Everything below that takes mind as the path. Now, mind is a translation for the word sem, which means thinking, confused mind. What that means is that we take our confused minds, all of us here, and we apply it to study, meditation, contemplation, the 3 wheels. And in doing so, we hope to get somewhere. We hope that by and through our practice, we will achieve realization. There's a problem with that approach. Because what Buddhism is teaching is that all of us are fundamentally Buddha. We are awake. We just think we're not. Literally, think we're not. That's sem. That's ordinary mind. That's mind working. It thinks there's something wrong with me, and if I work hard, study, practice, do good works, someday I will get enlightened. But the problem is, since we are already enlightened, you can't achieve it that way. Because every time you think, someday I'll get enlightened if I work hard, what you're saying, you're denying your enlightenment. You're saying there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. I have to fix it. And if I do this, then that will happen. This is called the path of means. Cause and effect. And so do you see, it's an impossibility. It's a self-contradiction in terms. You can't get enlightened someday because you already are. And if you think that someday you'll get enlightened, you're just reaffirming the fact that you're denying it right now, over and over and over again. So you see, taking wisdom as the path means that you acknowledge your enlightened mind now. This can only be done with the help of a teacher for most people. There are a very, very, very small number of people who can do it by themselves. 1 in trillions. Most people need someone else to help them. And that's what the lineage is all about. That's why it's important to be part of a lineage with people like Lung Chenpa in it, who are passing down the wisdom very personally, very directly. This is called pointing out instruction in the lingo, or it's called, in the Zen tradition, it's called satori. In the Tibetan tradition, it's called pointing out. It's called meeting of the minds of teacher and student. And what it requires is 2 things. It requires a teacher who has the capacity to transmit this experience, this vision, this seeing, the seeing that one is a Buddha, seeing what it means to see enlightened world. And it requires a student who is ready and open, ready to hear the teachings, and very open, beyond false humility, but humble, beyond trying to be open, but open, and ready to receive. And when those 2 conditions come together, the teacher and the student, then there's what's called the meeting of the minds, or transmission, or the passing of the torch. And then what happens is that both individuals share the vision of reality. It belongs to nobody. The student feels that they've been given something. And that's a necessary illusion. It's necessary because humility and gratitude slay ego. But actually, what's happened is that the 2 minds of teacher and student have met, have opened to each other. And once that happens, then the student knows how to take wisdom as the path, knows how to acknowledge his or her enlightened nature, to come back to it. Because we forget it. We lapse into habit. We lapse into dream. We've developed these bad habits. But then the student is there, but their practice is to come back. To come back to what the teacher has shown them. Lung Chenpa, in his writings, describes the nature of reality, what they're coming back to, in great detail. And he describes the techniques of coming back. And there are, in the Dzogchen tradition, 2 main techniques. One is called cutting through, and the other is called passing over. And we're not going to go into them tonight, but to say this, that cutting through, main technique of Chögyam, is basically what we do together here for 30 minutes before this talk. Every time we rest our minds in this space, every time we let go of thoughts of the past and the future, we are, however imperfectly, cutting through to this, cutting through to primordial purity is the term, kadak in Tibetan, which really, and the reason I'm giving you this term, primordial purity, is that it's kind of a code name for Shunyata, which is the topic of this talk tonight. It's kind of an up-level of Shunyata, but it's still Shunyata. And that's what is being cut through to. Cutting through thought, hope and fear, judgments, dreams of the past, dreams of the future, with all of their anxiety and struggle. Cutting through like a sword to Shunyata. Call it emptiness, and the other word that it's used in the Vajrayana for it is primordial purity. Pure of what? Pure of I and other. Pure of any trace of judgment, of I, of dualism. Because you see, what we're sitting in here, this ground, the ground of our being, has two, for starters, two and then three main characteristics. The two main characteristics, and I'm giving you an up level of this talk right now, just a slight up level. What Shunyata means is literally the word means empty, and ta is a nominative, so it turns into emptiness or voidness. Empty of what? Empty of dualism, empty of I and other. The problem is that we think that things actually exist, that I exist, that others exist. And that is just a thought, and it's a wrong thought. Because really what we're sitting in the middle of is this empty, open space, out of which everything is arising and passing away so instantaneously that you can't even point to what it was, because now it's something else. It's changed, it's moved, it's changed its location, it's changed its appearance, it's blinked, it's whatever it's done. All these sounds, these words coming out and appearing and disappearing. What we're sitting in the middle of, in the moment, is a kaleidoscope. It's a phantasm. It's a magic show. That's what one of the traditional things. It's a mirage we're sitting in the middle of. And yet we concretize it all the time. And what emptiness is saying is that the things that we concretize it as, they aren't real. They're just imaginary. They're just thoughts. And we spin off into stories about these thoughts that bind us into certain kinds of feelings and actions. So we look at that person and we say, I don't like that person. He reminds me of my angry father or my nasty mother or whatever it might be, or he said something mean to me, or she said she ignores me, or whatever it might be. And we have resentments and hatreds. Or we look at somebody and we say, oh, they're very attractive. I want to get to know that person. And we feel like we're drawn to them, and we're imagining having a love affair and how great it's going to be in the future. Or how terrific it was in the past, and how sad we are that it's over. And all of these thoughts about I and other, I and other. And meanwhile, what we're sitting in the middle of is arising and passing away continuously. Nothing endures for even a split nanosecond. And nothing has any true substance. We think that things actually have substance, right? But everything is just a momentary presentation. That knock, that sensation of the wood on the knuckle. Gone. Where'd it go? It's there in memory, if I think about it, but that's it. In the moment, it just passes. This is Shunyata. This is the emptiness of I and other, the emptiness of past and future, the emptiness of anything having any true existence, including me. I am just another idea. And you. They're just parts of stories. Stories that we tell ourselves about our lives. Those stories are our karma. They've been built, those stories, through repetition, through past events that we hold on to in a memory. And they enslave us, those stories. They entrap us. I can't do that. I really want to do the other. I'm really pissed off about so-and-so. I've got plans. I have to. I must. I fear. And we are the victims of these stories. And we are their slaves. As long as we believe in them. And so what the path is about, I'm just throwing out these notes, is the path is about coming back to this, one way or the other, with or without the help of a teacher. A teacher, as I described, can give you transmission in varying degrees, according to the power of the teacher, and according to your openness, one's openness. But even without that, we can begin to understand this, to make sense of it, and to see its implications for our lives. So what we're sitting in the middle of is this open space full of the arising and passing away of phenomena, or as they term them in Tibetan, nangwa, which is usually translated as appearances. All of these things are appearances. The table, the voice, the physical sensation, the taste of the water. Appearances which arise and pass away in space. They are not other than the space because they have no true substance. They're just modulations of the space, kind of like pixels on a computer screen. Reflections on water. Some of the traditional analogies are reflections on water, a magic show, mirage, images in a mirror. Think of any others? A dream, that's a good one. A dream's a good one. Things in a dream don't actually exist. Thank you. A city of Gandharvas. Gandharvas are sort of these beings. They're actually hungry ghosts. But they appear as musicians, celestial musicians. And I don't know what they look like. Do you? Gandharvas? Yeah. A city of Gandharvas. They're sort of imaginary beings like what are those things that have the head of a lion and the tail of a snake? Chimeras.
Khenpo Tsultrim Gyamtso taught us this short verse, but I think it may be from a Mahayana text. It's like a dream, like an illusion, like a city of Gandharvas. That's how life, that's how living, and that's how dying are taught to be.
Nice. I think there are either 5 or 7 traditional analogies for this. Huh? The 8 Mayas? Don't know that one. Sounds like it's Hindu. No? He does? The 8 Mayas? Okay. Do you remember any of them?
Well, the ones that you mentioned.
Any others?
Echo is another one.
What?
Echo.
Echo. An echo. That's a good one.
The moon and the water.
That's another one. The moon and the water.
Yeah, ghost. I said ghost.
It's a reflection in water.
I think we're missing one.
We might. But we've got the idea. So here we are in the middle of this space with these appearances that are arising and passing all the time. Now here's the other aspect of this space. It's lit. It's lit with knowledge. The knowledge is called, by various names, Rangjung Yeshe in Tibetan, which means self-arising primordial wisdom. Primordial wisdom, it's knowledge. Yeshe. We got to understand, these words in English, they always limit it and change things. So let's go back to the Tibetan. The Tibetan is Yeshe. Ye means without beginning or end. Primordial. She is the root of the word to one of the words, many words, to know. So it means knowledge that has no beginning or end. Rangjung means self-arising. Nothing makes it arise, just arises all by itself. And passes away too. But this space is full of it. Is full of this knowledge. That's how we can see the cup, hear the words. This space out of which everything arises and passes away is full of knowingness, and this knowingness is not dualistic. It's not I know Lane, It's everything is self-known. Rang, Rik is another term for it. Rang means self, Rik is another of the words to know, to see. Self-seen, self-known. So these are the two main characteristics of reality. Spacious, which accommodates everything arising and passing away, and full of knowingness, self-knowing, glowing with it. So all we have to do, you see, this is why it's not a matter of acquiring any knowledge. All we have to do is let go of our distractions and come back. And here we are, in this lit space. So you've been studying Longchenpa too with somebody. Whom?
Well, the Longchen Foundation was founded by Trungpa Rinpoche and Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. And they appointed Rizin Shikpo as the spiritual leader.
I see, Rizin Shikpo.
So
right.
Longchenpa is the foundation of the whole the whole Longchen Foundation.
Okay. So you've gotten a lot of Longchenpa. Yeah, I was very sacrilegious back in the early days, and I asked Trungpa Rinpoche, I said, if you could name the Babe Ruth of Tibetan Buddhism, who would it be? And he didn't even pause. Yeah. So Rizin Shikpo. Okay. So, one of the characteristics of this space is that it's empty of anything having any true existence. Now, when we mean true existence, let's define that. We mean true existence. The term in Sanskrit is svabhava, and in Tibetan it's rangjin. And this was attacked in the early part of the Christian era, although it wasn't Christian era because it was in India, but by a group of people called the Madhyamakans. There were those who tread the path of the middle way, and the foremost of whom was a man named Nagarjuna, or Nagarjuna. And they attacked logically the idea of anything having any real existence, because we all think that things exist. We think that the table exists, that I exist, that you exist. And what they said is that the three qualities of existence are endurance through time, time is just a myth. It's a story we tell in thought. All we've ever got is the present, which is constantly passing away and being born again in the present. The rest of it is dream. So the first characteristic is endurance through time. The second characteristic is that what exists is unitary. It's one thing. But find me anything that's one thing. Everything is made up of parts. I got arms and legs, a head, all kinds of parts and molecules, and even the molecules have parts, and even the atoms have parts, and it's just endless. There's nothing that is without parts. And the third characteristic is that things exist independently. But nothing exists independently. We're all dependent on the air, the water, the floor, everything that makes our lives possible. We're utterly dependent. So these three qualities of endurance through time, being unitary and independent, don't hold. They can't be found. And so nothing has any true existence. In the term svabhava, it all lacks svabhava. And that's what's meant in the Heart Sutra. Rinpoche goes through the Heart Sutra. And he says, he quotes the Heart Sutra. In the beginning it says, form is emptiness. Okay, and what that means is what I've just been saying. Nothing exists. Right? Nothing has any svabhava. It's empty of svabhava. Just these images in a mirror, images on water, or whatever we want to call it. Can't find it. You grasp it and it's gone. It goes right through your fingers. So form is emptiness. But then the next statement, emptiness is form. And what that's saying is, don't get caught up in a philosophy of emptiness. Then you go around trying to see everything as empty. Makes you kind of crazy. So finally, emptiness is no other than form. This is it. Everything that arises and passes away is one with the space. It's just like pixels on the computer screen, like the images in a mirror. You can't separate the images from the mirror, right? And yet they're just passing through the mirror. So emptiness is no other than form, and form is no other than emptiness. Now, the Heart Sutra was a denial of the Hinayana philosophy, which was an atomistic philosophy. The Hinayanists thought everything were made up of atoms of matter, atoms of mind, and some other atoms that weren't either mind or matter. And so then the rest of the Heart Sutra is the denial of the Hinayana assertions. And it says, in the same way, and he goes through the rest of the 5 skandhas. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. There we have form, feeling, perception, formation, consciousness. Those are the 5 skandhas that go to make up an ego. And they are one arrangement of all of the atoms of existence. And then he goes in the same way, form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu, up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu. And what he's done there is, you see, there are all these different organizations of the atoms, of the things that exist that the Hinayana schools put together. And what they did was they took, one way they organized all the atoms, there were lots of atoms of form. There are lots of atoms of mental events, like courage and anger and concentration and all these kinds of things. And they organized them into, first of all, the 6 senses. So there's the eye and the objects of the eye. There's the ear and the objects of the ear. Smell, taste, touch. And then there's the mind and the objects of mind. And then you can throw in the mind. Well, anyhow, that's basically what he's doing. We won't go through it. They're the ayatanas and the dhatus, they're called. And then he says, in the same way, no feeling perception of people are conscious, no inner or second about it. No ignorance, no end of ignorance, no ignorance, no cause of ignorance, no end of ignorance, and no path. There go the Four Noble Truths. It's like, it's already here. You're not going to get it by treading some path to it. And then what do we have? No ignorance, no form. Help me here. Every time I stop, I lose the momentum. No old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path. That's the Four Noble Truths. No wisdom, no attainment of wisdom, and no non-attainment of wisdom. Right? And that's this idea of if we do this, then we're going to get that. So even in the Prajnaparamita, it's saying the same thing as they say later, much more forcefully in the Dzogchen teachings. No wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, the bodhisattvas abide by means of Prajnaparamita. There is no obscurity of mind. They have no fear. They transcend falsity. Right? And then the mantra at the end. He says, so Shunyata in this case is the complete absence of concepts, of filters of any kind. The absence even of form is empty, and emptiness is form. You're going to hand out the Heart Sutra? Okay. We could chant the Heart Sutra. That'd be great. So the Shunyata principle involves not dwelling on anything, being suspended nowhere. So this is a big part of what I've been talking about in Dzogchen. It's the kadak, it's the primordial purity, it's emptiness. I said that there are these two main principles, space and wisdom, right, that are in union. And then within that, the sort of sub-layer is, then you get the three principles of the three bodies of the Buddha, or the three essences. They're also called essences in Dzogchen, where they become, maybe you're familiar with this, Ngowo, Rangjin, and Tukche. Instead of it being, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, we've got Ngowo, which means essence, Rangjin, which means it's really the Sambhogakaya. And what this is referring to is that the first body of the Buddha, the ultimate reality, is that everything is empty, has no substance. It's emptiness. The second level is, and yet, within emptiness, things appear. They appear and they communicate what they are. The red of a red sweater, the sweet of sugar, the sound of a loud noise. And then finally, not only do they communicate, but they take presence. Lane, the table, the cushion, these words. That's the third level, and that's called the embodiment body of the Buddha, the Nirmanakaya. These are the three principles. So, our task is to begin to work with and develop an understanding of the first one, Shunyata. Shunyata is so important. It's the entrance, the discovery of emptiness is the entrance into the second level of the path, the Mahayana. Remember I said there are 10 levels, 10 bhumis in the Mahayana? The first bhumi is the discovery of Shunyata, and it's called great joy. Why? Because one discovers that I don't exist. You don't exist. And I is such a sack of woe. It's automatic release from suffering. So the Bodhisattva is really happy. And that first bhumi, that first level of the Mahayana path where the Bodhisattva discovers Shunyata, is called pramudita, which means pra is an intensifier and mudita means joy, great joy. Because it's freedom. Freedom from belief in I and other. Freedom from these nasty worries and hatreds and the kleshas that we carry around. Jealousy and passion, lust and greed. All the rest of them. Depression. So Shunyata is huge. It's really a major breakthrough in the path. And then it becomes just one of the key principles, descriptors of the real that we are constantly being enjoined to recognize. Here's a quote. This is Trungpa Rinpoche. Once we take away the idea of perceiving reality, it's like, I'm going to perceive reality, and then I'll get somewhere, right? Once we take away the idea of perceiving reality, the preconception of the existence of mind and reality, then everything emerges clearly as it is. There is no one to watch, no one to know anything. Reality just is. And this is what is meant by the term Shunyata. Wow. That's so powerful and so simple. There's a lot of great stuff in the Q&A here. So he says, Shunyata means the absence of all conceptualized attitudes. Nagarjuna, the founder of the Madhyamaka school in the 2nd century AD, said, the perfect sage does not see the mind or thought derived from the mind, just here. Really simple. Someone asks, what does it mean to be free from the karmic chain? Remember you talk about these stories that bind us? He answers, enlightened people do not plan for the future because they have no desire to provide security for themselves. They have conquered the preconception of future. They are fully in the now. The now has the potential of the future in it, as well as that of the past. Enlightened people have completely mastered the restless and paranoid activities of mind. They are completely fully in the moment. Therefore, they are free from sowing further seeds of karma. Being bound. Enlightenment is being awake in the nowness. Animals and infants live in the present, but are not awake. They are dwelling on something and getting feedback from it. An enlightened person has completely transcended the subject-object division. And then finally, this last quote. When we experience Shunyata, we are completely involved, without the subject-object division of duality. We are also free from confusion. Confusion is always wondering, how am I doing? So maybe we can have a discussion at this point. Giuliani, what?
Giuliani.
The man, Mayor Giuliani, what about him?
How am I doing?
Huh?
I always used to say, how am I doing?
He used to say that? How am I doing? Yeah. He's not doing so well now. Didn't his wife leave him recently?
That was his second wife.
Yeah. Second wife, okay. Yeah, I mean, happens to everybody. Lane.
Yes, there were a few questions that came up for me. I can't quite remember them all. Your talk was so rich. Thank you. You were like on fire. But one thing, let's see. Yeah, you were talking about taking the mind as the path versus taking the wisdom as the path, and the danger of just taking the mind as the path, right?
Well, until we know how to take wisdom as the path, we have to take mind as the path. And what that means is that we're doing things in order to get something. So, there's a cause and effect relationship. And all the yanas beneath Dzogchen, and even some of the Dzogchen yanas do that.
That's clear to me. My only concern is taking wisdom as the path alone and neglecting the mind. It seems to me like, yes, we are already enlightened, right? But it's kind of like what Shunryu Suzuki said. He says, "Are you perfect as you are? But you could use a little improvement." so there's always a little further we can go. There's always, even though we're already enlightened, there's still this neurosis that needs resolution, that needs healing. So that's what. Well, does that make sense?
When in this discussion, when we use the word mind, I'm sorry, I'm coming out of these teachings where it was assumed that we knew what mind meant. Mind is translating a Tibetan term which is sem. Sem is neurotic, thinking mind, as opposed to some of the terms for enlightened mind, yeshe, in Tibetan, rigpa, are the two probably main ones. And those are non-dual mind, enlightened non-dual mind. Sem is dual. It's thinking mind that believes in an I and an other. So you might say, for instance, going back to Suzuki Roshi, Sem is little mind, and Yeshe and Rigpa are big mind. And Roshi was constantly enjoining us to let go of little mind and appreciate big mind. And big mind, it's a great terminology. Little mind is this. Little mind is in there thinking. It's in your head. It's tiny. And big mind is everywhere. It's space. It's the universe. It has no limits. It's infinite.
Then what's the difference between taking big mind as the path and taking wisdom as the path?
The same.
Okay.
It's just different lingo.
Got it.
But the systems that they're part of, each of them are different. And there are other differences that relate. Rinpoche spent a lot of time talking to Roshi about those differences. A lot of time. They have probably spent, if they spent 10 hours together during before Roshi died, that would be a lot. But Rinpoche used to rehearse to go out there, with us, talking about what he wanted to talk about with Roshi. And what he was talking about was the difference between the Vajrayana and the Mahayana, because Roshi was a Mahayanist, Anyhow. But they loved each other. Both of them realized they saw in each other true Buddhists and like minds.
Well, for many years, Roshi was on one of the shrine photos.
Oh, yeah.
All the Dharma Datsus.
Oh, yeah. While Trungpa Rinpoche was alive, and for a long time after he was alive, after he died, the only photographs on the shrines everywhere of all of
the Dharma Dhatus
of the centers of students of Trungpa Rinpoche were a photograph of Trungpa Rinpoche and a photograph of Suzuki Roshi.
and Khyentse Rinpoche.
Occasionally Khyentse Rinpoche, occasionally Jamgon Kongtrul, but the two constants were Roshi and Rinpoche.
And the Karmapa.
Now, those came in and out and
Maybe.
had occupied different parts of the shrine
There's
room.
always
But I can
Suzuki Roshi.
see that shrine room at 1111 at 1111 Pearl Street, you know, and the shrine room, you know, in Karmadzong with the shrine with just those two photos on it. Yeah. He really adored Roshi.
I thought of another song that would illustrate your talk. It's like sort of like a wish-fulfilling prayer. May the shining light of this candle flame we offer to the 10 directions, victors and their heirs, remove the darkness of all beings' ignorance.
All beings what?
Ignorance. May the shining light of knowledge and wisdom blaze.
Beautiful.
Should I sing it?
Sure.
May the shining light of this candle flame we offer to the 10 directions, victors and their heirs, remove the darkness of all beings' ignorance. May the shining light of knowledge and wisdom blaze.
Thank you.
Khenpo Tsultrim Gyatso Tardas.
Yeah. As you see, there's a long tradition in Indian and Tibetan Buddhism of composing songs of realization. They're called doha. And great teachers often did this. I mean, Milarepa is probably the quintessential example of this. He, you know, the book of, you can buy the book of the 100,000 songs of Milarepa. He sang his teachings. Trungpa Rinpoche was constantly writing poems, and he would sit around writing them himself, and sometimes if he was sitting around with a group of students, they would compose a group poem, which we did here once under Rochelle's inspiration. You go around and each person puts in a line on the poem. It's called a group doha. So Khenpo Tsultrim Gyatso is definitely a part of that lineage, that tradition.
And also, this week, Wednesday and Thursday night at the Nalanda Bodhi Center where we rent space, Carl Brunholz will be here, who's a great scholar and a student of Ponlop Rinpoche and also Khenpo. He will be teaching on the Doha tradition this week, and he's an amazing teacher.
Great.
John, would you say a little bit more about the relationship between the Dharmakaya and emptiness? It's actually something I've been wondering about lately, and I didn't quite catch everything you were trying to get across.
Emptiness is kind of, I mean, they're almost the same thing. But emptiness has to do with a kind of the way it's presented, it's a curative. It's to cure us of belief in I and other, you see. And remember I said that the Bodhisattva encounters emptiness, and that meeting is the entrance into the Bodhisattva path, the first bhumi, the first stage. And it's the birth, and there's a paramita that goes along with it too. It's the transcendent virtue of generosity. And then you see, it's such a, you can imagine it's a great joy to be free of worrying about oneself. And that joy itself is suspicious. It's a path feature, because what are you happy about? You have to be remembering what you've gotten rid of in order to appreciate its absence, you know? And the analogy for this is like a bottle of perfume that has been emptied. The perfume was suffering, confusion, samsara. And there actually used to be a perfume, I don't know if there still is, called samsara. You could buy it in a store. And so the idea is, the analogy is that you empty the bottle, and now it's empty, it's void, it's shunya, right? It's empty of suffering, confusion, dualism, which is what Shunyata is. But when you hold it to your nose, you can still smell the odor. And that's the analogy for Shunyata, that when you appreciate Shunyata, you're still smelling the odor of confusion and suffering. Okay? So you see, Shunyata is a path concept. You're still moving forward. When it gets to being the level of Dharmakaya, emptiness is no longer a path concept. It's a descriptor, a pure descriptor of reality. It's one of the main features of reality, that nothing has any true being, any svabhava. And out of this emptiness, phenomena arise and pass away. So there's this thing that sometimes you chant in different venues where it says, nothing exists and yet things appear. They appear and yet they do not exist. It's everywhere, you know. It's a little mantra. And what it's referring, this is a descriptor of the Dharmakaya. And the Dharmakaya is one of the descriptors of reality. The Sambhogakaya refers to the fact that when things appear, they communicate. They have qualities which present themselves. They're not communicating to anyone in particular or any other external being. They're just flashing their qualities all over the place. And then finally, the third one is the Nirmanakaya, that as they appear, they take embodiment. And they do this, in fact, the third Nirmanakaya is sometimes called indivisible compassion. And the reason is, you see, that for confused sentient beings, reality takes form in teachers. And confused sentient beings call forth the teachers that they need according to the confused sentient beings' needs and obscurations. That's the phrase. According to our needs and obscurations, we call forth the teachers that we need. And this happens at every level of existence. It's not just for human beings, it's for animals, it's for gods, it's for hell beings. All of them call forth the Buddhas that they need in order to move forward on the path. So if you see a wheel of life, you know, Yama, this demon, holds the wheel of life, and it's divided into a lot of different things, but the main divisions are into the 6 realms: the God realm, the realm of the jealous gods, the human realm, the animal realm, the realm of the hungry ghosts, and the hell realm. Each one of them, if you look at the outer side, has a little guy in a robe standing there. And you wonder what he is? He's a Muni. That Muni means a sage. He is the Muni that has been called forth by the beings in that realm to help them tread the path to enlightenment. So we're all finding what we need.
Something in your reply reminded me of another one of my questions. What are some of the other bhumis beyond emptiness?
What are some of the what?
Didn't you call it bhumi?
Bhumis?
Yeah. What are some of the other bhumis?
I don't know the names of most of the bhumis because what one focuses on more are the transcendent virtues that appear and that the bodhisattva embodies at the level of each bhumi. And that's what's taught a lot more than the actual name of the bhumi. So for instance, the second bhumi, the first bhumi I mentioned was generosity, dana, paramita. And the second bhumi is discipline, shila. I think it's discipline. Is it discipline? Or is it patience?
Oh, okay. You're talking about the paramitas. I
Yeah.
thought... Okay.
Yeah, there's a paramita connected with each bhumi.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 6th bhumi is prajna paramita. 5th is meditation. 4th is virya, energy. And then the 3rd and the 2nd, I think the 3rd actually is shila, discipline, and the 2nd is patience, kshanti. And then the 7th is upaya, skillful means. And I forget, there are transcendent virtues connected with the 8th, 9th, and 10th. I do remember the name of the 10th bhumi. It's Dharma Mega, which means cloud of Dharma. And the idea is that the bodhisattva at the 10th bhumi is just about, they're suffused in Dharma and in wisdom. And they're just about to get enlightened, but they feel that something is holding them back. And then that person realizes what's holding them back in this cloud. You see, it's almost like a cloud of wisdom, and it's a cloud of confusion. They can't quite figure out what's holding them back. And then they realize what it is, and what it is that they're trying. They're trying to get somewhere. It's just pandemic. That it's never ending, that effort to get somewhere. And when they realize that, supposedly instantaneously, they're there. That's enlightenment. I mean, that's the story, anyhow.
But we work on all these bhumis simultaneously. It's not like the Hinayana approach where there are definite where they say there are definite stages along the path. Is that right?
I don't know. I think you do the practices, and
that's kind of why I asked. I wanted to know if there was a recommendation, like what to work on beyond emptiness immediately after.
You do the practices that your teacher and the tradition give you, and the most profound of them is the meditation practice that we are doing here in the 30 minutes before we have a talk, where we rest in space. I mean, that's it. We call it vipassana. Vipassana means meditation, or in the Pali they call it vipassana, and it literally means superior seeing. But really what we're doing is we're resting in space. We're resting our awareness here in space without subject and object. We're coming back just to this, letting go of subject-object thoughts. And that practice progresses, just gets more and more perfect, until at the level of the great perfection, it's called cutting through. Same practice. Resting in the space of this present moment. It's just that the more it's done, the more it becomes real instead of being a practice.
Well, recently I read or I heard a talk by Trungpa Rinpoche where he said that he defined what Dharma art is, and most of the teachings he taught were all related to Dharma art. His phrase was Dharma art. And he said that the instruction about what Dharma art is, the practice of non-aggression. And I think if I were to define like the 10th Bhumi, I have no idea what that is, obviously, but I would say it's the practice of non-aggression, completely.
Well, in order for there to be aggression, there has to be an I and an other. And without that, without I and other, there can't be aggression. There's no one to aggress. Carmen.
Hello? Yeah. The teaching reminded me of a little story, but I cannot remember in what sutra it is, but it's very connected to the teachings tonight. It goes a little bit like this. Maybe you've heard it. It's the story of Bahia. It's a guy who spent his whole life as in the trade, in the market, selling stuff, very wealthy. He grew up old but very rich. Towards the end of his life, he was deeply inspired to learn Dharma, but he thought maybe it was a little bit too late. He still traveled to where he heard that the Lord Buddha was living, and he decided to travel over there. He visited him, and he supplicated him for teachings. And the Buddha said, "No, I don't have time right now because we're asking for, how do you call alms, food, And so the guy asked for a second time, and the Buddha pretty much answered the same thing. "Not right now. It's not appropriate. We are busy." So he approached him a third time. As it's very traditional in this kind of stories, right? The third time is sometimes the good one. And so he said, "Okay, I'm going to give you a teaching." And he told him, "Well, in the scene, there's only the seeing, and the smell, there's only the smelling, and the taste, there's only the tasting, and the touch, there's only the touching, and the heard, there's only the hearing, and the thoughts, there's only the thinking." And he was in some kind of shock right after that. The second after he heard the teachings, was run over by a bull and was killed. And so the other followers of the Buddha who saw the whole scene were feeling a little bit bad about that poor guy, right? But the Buddha answered to them like, "No, you should not feel bad for him. He had enough time to be fully realized. So right now he's awakened as an arhat."
Okay.
So the power really of teachings like this and emptiness are of that kind. They carry that kind of power. Very, very deep. Very
That's
deep.
a terrific story. Thank you. That's a wonderful story. Well, maybe we should end now. What do you think? And so we could end with a dedication of merit for ourselves and for all beings. Do you want to do the Heart Sutra? It'll take a while, and it's already. I mean, yeah. Okay. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.